At the beginning of the 20th century, in the streets of Vienna, Austria, a young man in a worn coat wandered up and down the avenues. He had nothing. No money, no home to go back to, no place to sleep. He slept on the streets, and the only reason he walked those streets was to earn a scrap of bread to fill his stomach. He had no father, no mother, no family left. He carried one unfulfilled dream, one wish he had not yet reached. That dream had brought him to Vienna. His only desire was to become an artist, to one day be the greatest artist in Europe. He never achieved that dream. Vienna had become a kind of hell for him. Driven by poverty and need, he wrote letters to relatives asking for help. Those letters received little response. Perhaps if someone had shown him kindness then, he might have reached his dream, might have entered an academy of art, or family members might have taken care of him. The history of humankind might have been written differently. The world we live in could have taken another shape. But it didn't. Welcome to the letter room. We won't waste time. Let's go into the life of Hitler. If we want to tell Hitler's life story, it's best to go back a generation or two and begin with his grandmother, a woman named Maria. Maria was poor and worked in other people's homes. At the time, families were registering their names for official records across Europe. Surnames were fixed on those documents. The family's original surname was actually Himmler, but when they went to register, an official mistakenly wrote Hitler, and the family didn't correct it. That's how the Hitler family name came to be. As we said, this family lived in poverty. There is little reliable information about the grandfather, but the family was poor. Alois Hitler, Maria's son and Adolf's father, lost his mother Maria when he was 10 years old and had to fend for himself from that age. He went to work at a leather factory as a laborer and later managed to get a job at a government office, which improved his circumstances slightly. Alois married 3 times and had trouble with childbirth. Children were often stillborn or died young. Finally, on April 20th, 1889, he became the father of a very healthy, very strong boy. He felt life had smiled on him. He named the child Adolphus Hitler, who would later be called Adolf. A few years later, another son was born and named Edmund, Adolf's younger brother. According to historians, Adolf Hitler was an aggressive child who struggled to form social bonds. He often played truant, was not fond of studying, received poor grades, and suffered harsh treatment from his father, who was frequently violent. His mother, however, loved him intensely and believed in him. She wanted Adolf to become a priest, and therefore enrolled him in a religious school, hoping he would follow that path. Hitler was deeply attached to his family, especially to his devoted mother and his younger brother Edmund, with whom he spent most of his time. But when Edmund fell ill at the age of 11 and died, the once lively, mischievous boy sank into deep depression. Instead of playing, he spent most of his time at his brother's grave. A few years later, at 14, Hitler lost his father as well. Alois had been the family's main provider. With his death, poverty entered their home. Grieving for his brother and father while also facing financial hardship, Hitler, now a teenager who had dropped out of school, abandoned religious training and pursued his artistic impulses. He painted and decided to become an artist. But poverty dogged both him and his mother. Still, his mother remained his refuge and constantly encouraged him, saying, "One day you will become the greatest artist in Europe." This hope lasted until Hitler was 18, when his mother also died. At that point, he went to Vienna to enroll at the Academy of Fine Arts. He took the entrance exam and was rejected. The instructors believed he had no artistic talent. Hitler, however, insisted he was an artist and had been unseen. How did his life in Austria unfold? Mostly as a drifter. He refused to take any job that wasn't related to art, believing anything else would be a waste of time. He waited for discovery. But the spirit of that 18-year-old was in terrible condition. Grief, poverty, the loss of both parents, memories of his dead brother, loneliness, and endless walking through Vienna's streets. He sold the last possessions left by his family for money and spent a year living extravagantly until those funds ran out. He returned to the brink of destitution. With no money and no shelter, at 19 he became homeless. Still unwilling to accept just any work, he decided to write letters. He bought paper, a pen, and envelopes and began writing to friends and relatives he had lost contact with, asking for financial help and claiming that by supporting him, they would be helping a future great artist who would conquer the world. Some replied advising him to find a job. Many did not answer at all. This is the moment when we can ask, what if those letters had been answered differently? Perhaps the course of his life and the course of history would have changed. But they went unanswered. Hitler lived for 2 more years in the streets of Vienna. To survive, he painted watercolors of tourists who visited Vienna. He clung to his claim, "I am an artist." The paintings earned him a little bread, but never enough to sustain a decent life. According to historians, he remained homeless during all these years, sleeping on Vienna's streets. In 1913, Hitler moved to Munich. By then, he had given up hope that art would be his path. He was disillusioned and hurt by it. In Munich, he saw an advertisement and enlisted in the army, choosing a military life to escape homelessness and hunger. The army provided him a salary, a position, and structure. He was satisfied with the order it brought. A year later, World War I began. From a young age, Hitler had a strong German nationalist sentiment. He joined the war zealously, encouraging fellow soldiers and preaching German pride. He expected victory and was passionate about the cause. When World War I ended, Germany had been defeated. Kaiser Wilhelm II's rule collapsed, and the Weimar Republic was formed. The Treaty of Versailles that followed was thoroughly punitive toward Germany. It held Germany responsible for starting the war, imposed heavy reparations, and forced territorial concessions. The treaty humiliated Germany. It had lost the war and its morale. Poverty erupted across the country. The new government tried to rebuild using the working classes, a policy many post-war governments adopted, but Germany lacked the conditions for success. The result was catastrophic hyperinflation. From 1921 to 1923, the German people seemed stunned, living in a trance. Prices changed daily. Money lost value so quickly that people pushed carts of banknotes to buy a single can of beans. Photographs from the time show people burning banknotes to keep warm. The economy had spiraled beyond the control of statesmen. What did Hitler do in this period? Like many, he was disoriented and angered by Germany's defeat. He could not accept it. He remained in the army, which offered him little purpose now, a defeated force. He was assigned a minor intelligence post, tasked with monitoring political parties to see whether they posed a threat to the government. In 1919, he was sent to surveil the German Workers' Party and, to his surprise, found resonances between his views and theirs. Both wanted a return to German greatness and blamed the Jews for Germany's decline. Gradually, Hitler stopped acting as a spy and instead joined the party, the group that would become known as the Nazi Party. He became enamored with the party, distancing himself from the army and rising quickly through the ranks. He proved to be a persuasive speaker and began to rekindle German nationalist fervor among crowds, especially youth, growing party membership rapidly to around 2,000. By 1924, the party's leadership attempted a coup to overthrow the Weimar government. It failed. Hitler and other leading Nazis were arrested. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison for treason, but served only 9 months. In prison, he began writing his memoirs, Aims, and Strategy. which he titled Mein Kampf, My Struggle. Although sentenced to 5 years, Hitler was released after 9 months. His first act was to publish his writings as a book. Mein Kampf found unprecedented popularity and made him wealthy. Historians report that at one point he earned roughly $1 million per year from its sales. That money transformed his personal life and provided financial resources that strengthened the Nazi Party. Meanwhile, the Weimar government continued to erode, and social conditions worsened. The time became ripe for revolution. 2 powerful groups vied for influence: Hitler's Nazi Party and the German Communist Party. The crucial factors favored Hitler. Wealthy backers feared communism and were inclined to support him, and Hitler's charisma, fame, and success as an author made him widely known and acceptable to many Germans. The young man who once wandered Vienna for a loaf of bread could now, conceivably, seize control of Germany. But opposition arose. Jewish-run media attacked Hitler and warned against his rise. Hitler responded strategically and professionally. Rather than avoid or defame them, he engaged in public debates and directly confronted these media outlets, which multiplied his popularity. As Germany's chaos grew, poverty, unrest, and the influence of communists, increasing numbers of people turned to extremist solutions. Hitler found his chance and used the turmoil to his advantage. Under the punitive Treaty of Versailles, Germany owed enormous reparations. Into this scene stepped Charles Dawes, an American banker and investor who arranged substantial loans for Germany, which allowed some recovery and temporarily stabilized the economy in the mid-1920s. But the relief was fragile. The 1929 US stock market crash dried up international capital and plunged Germany back into crisis. The Weimar government faltered, and its president, Paul von Hindenburg, appeared ineffective. As the population's discontent grew, Hitler and the Nazis grew stronger. Hindenburg and other conservatives saw a political opportunity. Bringing the Nazi Party into government might stabilize the country and blunt unrest. In 1933, Hitler maneuvered into the government and quickly accused communists of plotting attacks against the state. Following a suspicious series of arsons and disturbances, events later revealed to have been orchestrated by Hitler's allies, communists were vilified and suppressed. Many were arrested, and the Communist Party was effectively neutralized. Hitler then tightened control over the media, crushed political opposition, absorbed or dissolved rival parties, and deployed violence and assassinations against opponents. The stage was set. The path forward was cleared, and the Third Reich would soon be born. Hitler was fiercely determined to restore Germany to its former glory and rebuild the nation. But that, he believed, required labor and money Germany had neither in sufficient supply. His regime's solution was brutal: seize wealth from the Jews, whom they cast as the rich, and force them into labor. Jews were sent to a network of forced labor and concentration camps to work for the regime. In the short term, the economy seemed to find footing again, though countless human lives were crushed in the process. The Holocaust itself remains the subject of vast historical study and documentation. Then came the Second World War, driven in part by a desire for revenge over the way Europe had treated Germany, and by a chain of other events. This was no longer a conflict where thousands would die. Tens of millions perished, and the devastation continued for years afterward. Disease, hardship, and states that struggled to stand again. One clause of the Treaty of Versailles had forced Germany to cede 13% of its territory. Many observers at the time argued this was a hostile provision that should never have been imposed. Some believed that if it hadn't been, World War II might not have occurred. Sometimes, in the name of peace, we squeeze a defeated country for more, and without realizing it, we dig our own grave. Peace has rules. break them and the consequences can be severe. Versailles was one-sided and indifferent to the German public, and it was foreseeable that another war could follow, and should Germany regain strength, that Germany might start it. In any case, the war did break out, and millions died. Destruction and suffering endured long after 1945. Whether in the Holocaust or in World War II, Hitler was a central actor, indeed, in some sense, the director of these events. It's said Hitler had a half-sister, and when he became wealthy in 1925, he decided to bring her and her daughter to live with him, though his precise motives were unclear. The niece was a 17 or 18-year-old named Geli Raubal. Many historians describe the relationship between Hitler and Geli as that of an uncle and niece, while others argue it was romantic and merits scrutiny. According to that latter view, Hitler fell in love with Geli and, for that reason, brought his half-sister and niece to Munich and bought them a house. Geli, however, fell in love with Hitler's chauffeur. Enraged, Hitler fired the driver and placed Geli under a kind of house arrest, buying a home outside the city and confining her there. Later, Geli enrolled at the University of Munich's medical faculty, but she traveled only under escort. A driver would take her to campus and bring her back, and some say plainclothes men watched from the courtyard to ensure she had no contact with young men. Eventually, a heated argument erupted between Hitler and Geli. She insisted, "I don't want to stay here. Let me go live my life. This relationship is not right." Others say the dispute was over a singing class Geli wanted to attend, and Hitler opposed. In any case, Geli blurted out that she had fallen in love with a fellow student and planned to marry him and flee the country. Hitler was furious. The next day, Geli Raubal was found dead in her room, shot through the heart. German authorities recorded it as a suicide, though many suspect she was killed, possibly by Hitler himself. Nothing is certain. What is clear is that a young woman spent years in confinement, lived under pressure, and died. Her life far from what she wanted. Historians believe Hitler had romantic relationships with 8 women, though details on most are scarce. The best known is Eva Braun. Many have seen her photographs, and their story is widely told. About a year after Geli's death, or suicide, Hitler met Eva Braun at a Nazi party gathering. He was 40, she was 17. He hired her to work for him. Thus began an intense, strange romance. Hitler was deeply attached to her, and Eva was, by all accounts, even more devoted to him. They truly loved each other. But these were Hitler's years in power, consumed by the affairs of state. He had little time for her. For political reasons and to preserve his public image, Hitler kept the relationship secret. Eva remained largely in the background, especially at private residences like Berchtesgaden. Throughout their years together, Eva repeatedly asked Hitler to formalize the relationship and marry her. He resisted, again for political reasons, and to maintain his image of devotion to the German nation. As World War II neared its end, Hitler knew his sunset had come. On April 30th, 1945, Soviet forces had reached the vicinity of his bunker. 3 people were present that day: Hitler, Eva Braun, and Hitler's longtime confidant Joseph Goebbels. That day, Hitler finally agreed to marry Eva Braun. She wore a long black dress and was elated to have achieved what she had long wanted. Hitler set one condition: they would marry, and then both would commit suicide. He made Goebbels promise that after they killed themselves, he would burn their bodies, and then escape to save his own life. Goebbels, the sole witness to the marriage, carried out Hitler's last wishes precisely. When the Soviets arrived, the bodies were not fully burned, and they recovered the remains. The corpses were transferred to a secure location, inaccessible to outsiders for a long time. That secrecy fueled years of rumors that Hitler had survived. In reality, on April 30th, 1945, Hitler died together with his lover. Many leading Nazis fled. often to the Americas, especially Argentina, but they had lost power. The German public no longer wanted them to rule. Most melted into ordinary lives in other countries. Some, however, wished to keep the ideology alive. In South America, a group formed calling itself neo-Nazis. Conditions there eventually grew difficult, and some went to the United States. Small neo-Nazi groups still exist. The US government designates such groups as terrorist organizations. While they sometimes surface in certain contexts, they hold no significant political power. There may also be small numbers in Germany and elsewhere in Europe, but nothing like the past. The Soviets retained Hitler's remains. After the USSR collapsed, custody passed to Russia, which did not allow Britain access to them. A curious point. Many nations suffered under Hitler, and he was reviled across countries central to the war: Britain, France, the Soviet Union, the United States, and more. When the war ended, most moved on to telling the history, rather than seeking revenge on a corpse. Britain, however, seemed to pursue the subject of Hitler relentlessly, even long after his death. Documentaries continued to appear, some claiming, absurdly, that Hitler had survived and would return. In 2018, Russia finally allowed British scientists to conduct DNA tests on remains attributed to Hitler, which confirmed his death. Those particular conspiracy documentaries ceased, but new ones emerged, including claims that Hitler killed all the Jews. Yet DNA later showed he himself had Jewish ancestry. Such tales are distortions and acts of spite. Tell us in the comments, why has Britain focused so intensely on Hitler even now? Why won't it let the subject go?